Hello, welcome to my How I Grow series. Stick around through to the end to see how I train my plants and veg, and how I ramp up my watering dosage throughout this time period to prepare for bloom. A big thank you to Spiderfarmer for sponsoring this video. Make sure to use code BASEMENT for a discount. I start the grow cycle by dropping my seeds straight into water. During the first 12 hours, they'll float on top of the water when they're poked. After the next day, they'll sink when they're poked, but I prefer to allow them just to float on top. Usually after 3 days of being in the water, the seed will have a sizable taproot and be ready to be planted. You could plant directly into the soil, but I tend to prefer to use a jiffy puck first, to give me more time to prepare the pot of soil for the tent. Once the jiffy puck is fully saturated, I'll squeeze out just a little bit of the excess water. If you've made it this far into the video, you're likely interested in gardening, and possibly have a plant started in your own garden at home. I'd like to take this time to welcome you into our community Discord, Basement Gardens. You'll find an invite link in the description of the video. You're welcome to ask any questions, and share your garden with other like-minded growers. I took a poll on YouTube to ask which growing medium that she should be grown in. Walmart soil won by majority. When I grow in Walmart soil, I prefer to use Schultz Premium Potting Mix because it has a gentle NPK value, plus it has some time-release nutrients. This soil has enough nutrients to get my plants into bloom. This is a 7-gallon pot filled with 27 liters of soil. The pot is 10.5 inches tall and has a 16-inch diameter at the top. This height of pot is perfect for any volume of pot. When scaling up your size of pot, you should look for increasing the width that the roots have to grow into. Sometimes the shell can get stuck on the seedling, and she'll need a little bit of help. This one would have probably done fine on her own, but I tend to like to help out when I can see that she's ready to come out. Usually the shell can be peeled off quite easily, by gently grabbing one side of the shell and using tweezers to pry off the other half. The hard part is grabbing the membrane and peeling it off. It's sort of like removing a shirt that has been saturated with water. My SF4000 light is hung about 44 inches above the soil, which will deliver about 600 to 650 ppfd of light intensity. I always prefer to grow my autoflowers under 24-hour light. Using about 60 ml of dechlorinated tap water, I try to gently water in the plant. The growing medium is quite dry, and the jiffy puck is quite dry, so I'm not too worried about oversaturating her with this much. It's a day later, and you can still see that there's a little bit of saturation left in the soil, but I think it's dry enough that she can handle another dosage. I deliver a similar dosage to what she got the previous day, about 60 ml. It's a day later, and the slow ramp up of dosage quantity has started. This time she's getting about 100 ml of dechlorinated tap water. The next day she's dry again, so I give her another 100-120 mils. The next day she's dry, and we're ramping up dosage even higher. We're up to about 350 mils today. She's still drying daily with a 350 milliliter dosage, so we're going to give her another 350 mils today. Looks like the next day she's dry and ready for another 350 milligram dosage. We're probably around day 9 of growth, so we're going to start ramping up to about 500 mils of dosage. Make sure to knock any water droplets off of the plant so that they don't become lenses and burn your leaves. With the 500 ml dosage, she lasted 2 days before drying out. Today, she's going to get 600 mils of dosage. She's starting to leave the seedling stage, but she's not quite in veg yet. She's around day 13 now, and she's large enough to handle a 1.5 liter dosage of dechlorinated tap water. With my autoflowers, I'll usually start training between day 12 and 15. This plant reached the appropriate size around day 15. I had taken a poll on YouTube of what kind of training you'd like to see, and the majority voted for low stress training. The training stakes that I use are cut and bent into shape from a roll of 9-gauge plastic coated wire. Once I get the stake roughly into the right position, I'll then test the plant to see what its flexibility is looking like. I'll then slowly cinch down the stake to get the plant into the optimal position. I like to get the plant bent into as deep set of a position as possible so that the training lasts for as long as possible. It's important to apply your training at locations that allow the plant to bend right back up into a healthy position. The next step I take is to lollipop or remove the bottom node that will be pointing downwards towards the soil. This node won't make it up to the top of the canopy because it needs to loop back around to reach the top. I'd like to take a moment to give a big warm welcome to Spiderfarmer. Thank you so much for sponsoring this video. Make sure to use code BASEMENT for an 8% off of products from the official Spiderfarmer website or 3% off Spiderfarmer products on Amazon. Spiderfarmer offers more than just lighting. They also carry tents, inline fans and carbon filters, trimmers, heat mats, grow bags, and other products related to growing. Their lighting has an ideal spectrum for the entire grow cycle. I prefer the SF series of their lights for how I grow autoflowers. The SF series has a large depth of intensity. The SF4000 in a 3x3 tent at 75% will produce around 600 ppft 44 inches away, which is perfect for seedlings. At around 20 inches away, the light will give you about 1000 to 1100 ppft. This is great when you don't want to constantly adjust your light's elevation from the garden. The plants can simply grow through the intensity ranges and arrive at the ideal intensity during bloom. If the particular strain doesn't make it to 20 inches from the light, I'll just give it a little booster seat to compensate. It's 2 days later and it looks like she needs a little bit of a readjustment. I start by removing this one leaf here because it's kind of acting like an umbrella and shading the lower nodes. That's better. Her soil is dry and she's ready for a 2-liter dosage of dechlorinated tap water. I gently remove the stake and reposition it into a more optimal position further down the plant. As I reposition the stake, I give a little twist to the plant's trunk to reposition both of these nodes so that they're both growing horizontally to the light, and so that one of them isn't growing downwards towards the direction of the soil. I notice that there's a little bit too much tension from just having the one stake so close to the end of the plant. So I add a second stake closer to where the stake was originally placed to give more support to the center of the trunk to cause a more even distribution of pressure. It's 3 days later and the soil is dry enough to be watered again. I go ahead and water her with about 2¼ liters of dechlorinated tap water. I start today's training by removing some of the larger leaves because they're a little bit too close to the soil. I also removed a couple of these smaller leaves around the bottom node to stop this area of growth from being a little bit too clustered. I then applied an additional training stake to the main node to keep it away from the lower nodes. I then carefully remove the supporting stake that we added because it's no longer necessary. I then start adding stakes to the lower branches just to help keep their distance away from the other nodes. It's 2 days later, and the soil is still too wet to be watered, but I am noticing that the 2 larger leaves in this plant are acting like umbrellas and are covering up some of the smaller nodes, so I just tucked them out of the way. The canopy is looking nice and even and flat. She's on the right track. For measuring light intensity in my garden, I like to use the app Photone, which is free for Android. You can see right now it's reading about 530 ppfd, but when I close the one side of the tent here, it goes to about 600. Once the tent's fully sealed up, that goes up to about 630. Here you can see the difference that a few inches will make on the light intensity in your garden. Just keep in mind when the tent is fully sealed up, that number will go up by about 100. And in some locations in your tent, maybe even 200. This side of the tent's reading a little bit lower, but that's because the one reflective wall is not closed. My SF4000 is a little bit older, and the newer models have a better distribution of LED lights, so my light has a little bit of a hot spot in the center. It's also important to note that depending on your phone, your results may vary. My new phone reads 200 ppfd lower than my old phone across the board. It's the next day, the soil's dry, and this leaf's looking at me funny. That's better. I then water her with about 2 liters of dechlorinated tap water. Three days later, and the soil's dry again, and she's looking like she needs a little bit of a trim. I start by sifting through the plant, just to get a rough idea of what's going on. I start by removing some of the leaves that are overlapping, and I also remove the larger leaves to keep the plant in a productive state. Since the soil is dry, I'll be watering again, but this time I'll be ramping the dosage up to 4 liters, or 1 gallon. Each of the branches needs a little bit of low stress training to readjust their elevations and distance to create a more even canopy. I remove the old stakes that aren't doing anything anymore and I repurpose them on the new branches. It appears that some of the branches on this plant have topped themselves. There's a few nodes in here that are just growing a little bit too close together. I might have to deal with those. But first, I'm going to remove this bottom node that has looped around from the bottom of the plant, and it's never going to make it to the top of the canopy. This node has to go because when I train the plant, it'll be underneath the canopy. The main stem's getting a little bit thicker, so I'd give it a little bit of tenderizing just so it doesn't snap when I bend it over with some low stress training. A little damage from squishing is far less severe than if the branch snaps. I then decide that this node has to go because it's going to be pointing into the center of the canopy. These 3 nodes are a little low in the canopy, as well as they're in the central area of the plant, and I'd like to have good airflow and light penetration to all my nodes in bloom. I probably should have removed this node earlier because it's in the central area of the canopy, but I decided to train it down inwards because in the outwards direction there's a few too many nodes there. I don't want to create a cluster. This node was just a little bit too close to the main node. After 4 days, it looks like the soil's dry again and ready for another dosage. The canopy is looking quite even, and there's not too much overlap going on, but there's still a few leaves that are looking at me funny. I want to train this branch over a little bit, but I first need to water the soil so that the stakes can stick a little better. So I water her with 4 liters of dechlorinated tap water, or 1 gallon. It's looking like she started week 1 to bloom. You can tell from the increase in hairs or pistils that are present near the tops of the plants, plus the shape of the growth of the tops has slightly changed. This will be more apparent with the larger nodes. She's looking nice and healthy, and I think she's ready to go through bloom and produce a mighty harvest. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to stay tuned for the next episode. Another big thank you to Spiderfarmer for making these videos possible. Make sure to use code BASEMENT for a discount.